Hello everyone, and welcome to my Peony Garden online class. I am so excited to share these 5 projects with you. I hope you have fun putting them together, at least as much fun as I did designing them. Now, to get started, you're going to need the 5 kits that are included in your class kit, and you'll also need to get your supplies ready. Okay, so at the beginning of each card, I will kind of show you what you need for each card so that you can maybe pause the video and gather your materials. Okay, all right, so we are going to get started with this pretty card. So this is a pretty simple one, but I just wanted to show you an easy way to color that beautiful stamped peony image. So for this card, you are going to need these ink colors. So soft seafoam, petal pink, and basic gray. You're also going to need the Love and Thanks to a Dear Friend sentiment stamp from the Prize Peony stamp set. And then this beautiful peony image. Okay, you'll also need your dies handy because we're going to do a little bit of die cutting. And you're going to need something to sponge. I like to use sponge daubers. If you don't have sponge daubers, you can use the Stampin' Sponges. You could use makeup sponges. You can even use a Q-tip in a pinch, okay? But you're going to need something to apply ink to your stamped image. All right, let's get to it. So to start, we're going to pull out the large piece of Whisper White cardstock. So you're using this kit, okay? The Whisper White was sitting on top like that. So you're going to pull out this large piece of Whisper White, and you're going to need your basic gray ink and your peony stamp. Now, this is a really large stamp. So rather than trying to take my image to the stamp pad and possibly miss part of it, whenever I have a large image like this, I like to actually ink my stamp by taking the pad to the stamp, and that way I can see to make sure that that is fully inked. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp that on my Whisper White cardstock. You have way more cardstock than you need, but I just wanted to make sure you had enough to do what you needed to do. And now we're going to apply a little bit of color. Now, this is a super easy way to color this flower. So I'm going to start with my petal pink and bring in my sponge dauber. I'm going to ink my dauber up, and then I'm going to just stamp it off a little bit on my grid paper. Then I'm going to start in the center of my stamped peony, and I'm going to work in a circular motion out to the edges of the flower. So each time I re-ink my dauber and start again, I'm starting in the middle. So that ensures that the middle of my flower is the darkest, which is what I want, and that the edges of my petals will be the lightest. Okay, now I'm just going to rotate this because it's a little bit easier for me to see when I'm shooting a video. Keeping my image sort of upwards makes it a little bit easier for me to see what I'm doing. It also helps so you don't have to see my head in the video frame. Okay, so there is my beautiful peony. I'm not worrying about going outside the lines. This is just a really soft, quick way to color the image. And then I'm going to also do my little bud here. And I want this to be pretty dark, so I'm just kind of going over like that. Okay, and that's that. So simple, eh? All right, now I'm going to pull in my soft sea foam, and I'm going to do the stem and the leaves. That's a little bit trickier because you don't have quite as much real estate to cover here. So again, I'm going to ink up my dauber. I'm going to just tap it off on my grid paper. And this time I'm working in very small circular motion. Okay, and I'm not worrying if I go outside the lines. This is supposed to be a little bit sort of abstract and soft. And then I'm going to add a little bit to my stem. I'm not putting a ton of ink on the stem just because I don't want it to be too dark. And then we're going to add a little bit to this leaf and a little bit to this leaf. Now when I'm doing the stem, I'm kind of going just up and down. I'm not really doing a circle. Again, that's to sort of contain the color. Keeping in mind that we are going to die cut this, and so a lot of that color that's outside the line, so to speak, is not going to be on our finished card. So we'll just add a little bit here, a little bit there, and just get a bit up under the blossom there. And that's it. So simple, right? All right, now we are going to go ahead and die cut this using the peony dies. Okay, there is my die cut peony. And now it's just a matter of assembling the rest of the card. So we are going to pull out the rest of our pieces from our envelope. And we're going to pull this piece of herringbone pattern DSP. So this is from the Peony Garden DSP pack. It's got that beautiful floral on the back. And we're also going to add our vellum doily. Now our vellum doily is actually going to go on before we do anything else. Now, if you look at the sample, you only see sort of this half, right? So in order to glue this, rather than get really fussy with little tiny bits of glue, we're just going to put a bit of tape down to sort of tack it into place temporarily. So keeping in mind that this is going to go right about here, okay? It's about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less from the right edge of our DSP. So we're just going to put a strip of tape right here to hold that in place until we get the other elements on. So we'll put that right about there, okay? And that's just going to kind of tack it down. All right. Next, you have this longer piece of ribbon in your kit. This is the gorgeous organdy striped ribbon. This is from the annual catalog. It's not part of the Peony Garden suite, but it works really, really well with it. Now, this ribbon can be a little bit temperamental to adhere glue dots. You have to press really hard. I'm putting 2 on each end, okay? Can you see those 2 glue dots there? And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. And again, because it's so sheer, you've really got to press to try and get it to stick. This one doesn't want to stick. Come on. Sometimes a little help is what is needed. Okay, so I've got my 2 glue dots on. Then I'm going to lay my ribbon across the front of my card about 1 inch up from the bottom. Okay, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm not measuring. And then I'm going to wrap those ends that have the glue dots on them around the back and just stick them on. Okay, so now they're stuck to the back of my panel. And again, you can adjust as necessary. And then we're ready to glue this onto our, actually, no, we won't. We're gonna glue these guys on first. So next you have a piece of DSP, this beautiful gray floral. It almost looks like a pencil drawing of the peonies. And then you have a piece of petal pink cardstock. Now these are gonna get layered. They're the same height. So you're gonna layer them so that the top and bottom edges are flush. And you're going to have a narrow little 1/16 of an inch border on either side. Now, whenever I'm using narrow borders like this, I like to use liquid glue when I'm layering because that gives me just a little bit of wiggle time to get my borders even. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this down. And then I can adjust it as necessary to get that exactly where I want it. Okay. And then I'm ready to go ahead and glue this onto my DSP panel. Now this is going on about 1 inch over from the left side, okay? And again, it's going to be so that I have about half of my doily showing. And for this, I can use tape or you can use liquid glue, whatever adhesive you have. Doesn't really matter. And I always like to use my grid paper to help me get this exactly straight. So again, this is where you just use your lines on your grid paper to line that up. Okay. All right. So now we're ready to put that onto our card base. So we have a basic gray cardstock base. It's 5.5 by 8.5 and it's scored in the middle at 4 1/4. Now all of these dimensions are listed on your cutting guide PDF. It will have all of the dimensions and pieces that you need. So if you want to recreate any of these, it's all there along with all of the supplies that I use to create each one of these cards. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add a little bit of adhesive to the back. Again, you can use whatever adhesive you have. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to stick this down, and you'll have to forgive me for gluing upside down. This is just the way I roll. I have no good explanation for why I do it this way. People always ask me. It's just my preferred method. I don't know. I'm strange that way. All right, so now we're ready to add our beautiful peony. We're going to add some dimensionals to the back of the peony. Probably 5 or 6. It's a pretty large die cut. I'm going to put a couple of minis down on my leaves down the bottom here. And I'll probably put a mini right down at the bottom of the stem. And we'll get rid of our backings. And we're going to pop that on. Now you're going to have this sort of hanging off the edge of your DSP. So it's going to kind of go on kind of like that. Okay. And the last, well, not last, but the next step is to stamp our sentiment. So our sentiment is going to get stamped on this die cut label. Now this is cut using the Ornate layer dies. And again, that is listed in your supply list. So we're going to take our basic gray ink and this Love and Thanks to a Dear Friend sentiment stamp. So we'll ink up our stamp. And I always like when I'm stamping on a pre-cut image to just kind of do a little test to make sure that I'm going to stamp it straight. Okay, it just kind of helps to make sure that you're getting things exactly the way you want them. All right, so there is my sentiment. Now that is going to go on as well. Now we have to think about the fact that this is already popped up, right? So we're going to put a dimensional under this end so that it lies flat, and there's a bit of tape on the other end so that it doesn't bump over top of the peony that's already popped up. So a dimensional and some tape, get rid of our backing. And we're going to pop that on. And I did it sort of right so that it lined up with my sentiment. Okay, just like that. You can maybe do it over a little bit. My peony's over a bit farther than on my sample. And then we're going to add our little bow just by pressing the knot of the bow into a glue dot. And then we're just going to press that on right there. And you just want to take care that you're not covering up your sentiment. So the last step is to add some of your elegant faceted gems. These are included in your kit. And I find the easiest way to use these, let me just close up my liquid glue here so it doesn't dry out, is with my Take Your Pick. If you don't have one of these, you can use the tip of your scissors. But I find this really, really handy to just sort of tuck the pokey tool in underneath the gem, and it just sticks to it and I can place it wherever I like. It's really, really quick and easy to place these when you're using that. Okay, now if you happen to have a Wink of Stella, you could always add a little bit of Wink of Stella to your blossom to give it a bit of shimmer. I did that on the original, but that's entirely up to you if you want to add that. Okay, now you also have in your kit a piece of Whisper White cardstock that is sized to go on the inside of your card, and you can decorate however you like. I just stamped some more images from the Prize Peony stamp set in the basic gray. Okay, but you can decorate however you'd like, and you could even make it a happy birthday. You could do whatever you like. Okay, all right, that is card number 1 done. Okay, moving on to card number 2. Number 2 is this one. This is a fun fold. It's kind of a different way. It's actually a variation on the Joy Fold. If you're familiar with the Joy Fold card, it opens like this. So I just took and turned it portrait. Okay, just for an interesting variation. Now, for this particular card, you are going to need the kit that looks like this. It's got some Whisper White on top. It's got a shorter card base in it. So pull that out, and you're also going to need your basic gray ink. You're going to need the 2 smaller peony stamps from the Prize Peony stamp set. You're going to need the 2 leaf stamps. And you're going to need that same sentiment stamp that we used on the last card, but we're only going to use a portion of it on this one. Okay. All right. So we're going to start by stamping and coloring our beautiful flowers for the front of our card. So you're going to pull out your piece of Whisper White cardstock and your basic gray ink. And we are going to stamp the larger flower once, and the smaller flower once. And then we are going to stamp several leaves. We're actually going to stamp each one twice. Okay, just like that. Now we get to do some coloring. I don't know about you, but I find coloring super relaxing, and the Stampin' Blends make it really, really easy. All right, so for this, you are going to need your soft seafoam combo. You're going to need your petal pink combo, and I'm just going to use the dark So Saffron. You could certainly use both the dark and the light if you wanted to shade on the middle, the center of the flower, but I find it's not really noticeable, so I just use the dark. All right, we're going to start by coloring the flower. So whenever I'm using my Stampin' Blends, I always like to make sure that I lay down a layer of light, whatever shade I'm using, to start, and before I start adding shadow. And that just helps me to blend. It sort of moistens the cardstock and allows me to move the ink around really easily. So I'm using the brush tip of my light petal pink, and I'm just going to really, really quickly lay down a layer of that petal pink. I'm not really worrying too much. I mean, I'm not going to color this center, but I'm not really worrying about staying in the lines of a specific petal. I'm staying in the lines of the outline of the flower. But in terms of trying to sort of contain myself to a single petal, I'm not worrying about that. So I'm coloring about a quarter of the flower to start. And then I'm going to come in with my dark. And all I'm going to do is take and add shadow wherever there is shading on the stamped image. Stampin' Up! Has made us all into amazing artists by providing us with these awesome stamps that include the shading to show us exactly how to get really cool depth on our colored images. So then I'm going to come back with my light petal pink, and I'm just going to blend that out. Okay, so I'm just kind of working. You can work with your bullet tip or your brush tip. I tend to use my brush tip when I'm doing videos because the bullet tip makes a rather annoying squeaky sound, and a lot of people don't like listening to that. But if you really want to be able to sort of dig in and blend, the bullet tip is great for that. I'm just trying to save you all from having to listen to the squeaks. Okay, so there is a quarter of my flower done. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to the next section. So I'm going to do another quarter, sort of this bottom section here. And again, I'm just adding my base layer. Okay, and then I'm going to come back in with my dark and add that shadowing. So I'm just, again, going over wherever the shading is on the stamped image. And it's just so easy to add shadow and depth with these stamps. Okay, and then back in with the light to blend all of that out. Okay, there we go. Now to fill in the center, I'm just going to use my dark So Saffron, and I'm just going to add some color just to the center like that. Okay, really easy. All right, we're going to do the same thing for the small flower, small peony. So again, we're going to start with our light. Now this one is so small, I'm actually going to color the entire thing to lay down my base layer, and then I can go back and add my shadows. I'm going to just leave that little bit of yellow there in the center, or a little bit for yellow in the center, I should say. And then back in with my dark, add my shadows. And then back in with the light to blend it all out. Okay. And then I'm just going to fill a little bit of yellow in the center here, just a little titch. Okay, and those are my flowers done. Now to color the leaves, same basic principle. I'm going to start with my light. Let's do these little leaves here to start. I'm going to lay down a layer of the light and then add just a little bit of the dark and then blend that out again. Okay, and then same thing on the larger leaves. I'll do two at a time. So I'll do my light. And then add my dark, just sort of along the veins. Okay, super easy. The blends make it so easy to get great shading and beautiful color. Okay, so now that we've stamped and colored all of those, we're going to go ahead and die cut them using the Peony dies. Okay, here are my beautiful die cut images. And now we're going to do some assemblies. We'll set those aside for a few minutes. And out of your kit, you want to pull your card base, the largest piece of basic gray. So you'll see that, and you want to turn it so that there's a large panel and a small panel. You want the larger panel at the top. Okay, so then you're going to take that small panel and you're just going to fold it upwards, just like you were folding a regular card base in half. Okay. All right, then we have in our kit a piece of beautiful, almost toile looking designer series paper. Again, this is from the Peony Garden DSP pack, and it is cut to fit on that large panel on your card base with a 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. So we're going to add a bit of tape and go ahead and adhere that. You want to just watch that you have an equal border, top and sides, and then the bottom will take care of itself. Okay, and then when we fold that shut, we have a piece of that herringbone pattern that is cut to fit on that piece. So again, we're going to add a little bit of adhesive. And I like to glue this with the card actually shut, because then I can line up the edges of this with the edges of my bottom DSP piece so that it is nice and straight. Okay. All right, we'll set that aside for a second. And then we have our last piece of basic gray. This is 3 by 8 inches, and it's scored in the middle at 4. So we're going to go ahead and fold that in half along our score line. And then in your kit, you have a piece of DSP that has been embossed. Now you can decide if you like this pattern, you can certainly use that pattern instead. I wanted something a little bit more solid, but you can do whatever you like. It's your card. This is cut to fit on the front. So the fold is at the top. Okay. And I'm going to glue that on as well, so that it has an equal border on all 4 sides. Okay. And then on the inside, you have a piece of Whisper White that is cut to fit on the inside. Okay, so imagine this is like a little mini card. So we've done the front, we're going to open it up, and the Whisper White piece is going to go on the inside like that. Again, you can use whatever adhesive makes you happy. I am in love with Stamp and Seal. It makes me very happy. Okay, so that is our little mini card. Now this mini card is going to get glued onto our large DSP panel on our card base so that it is centered. Now it's not going to be centered on all 4 sides, okay? So the 2 side borders are going to be equal, and the top and bottom borders need to be equal. All right, you will not get equal on all 4 sides. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right, so we're going to add some adhesive to the back of our little mini card, and that is going to get glued on. And I just want to make sure that I'm straight and centered, just like that. Okay, so that when we fold our card closed, it looks like that. Okay, just like that. All right, now we need to stamp our sentiment. Now you have another one of those die cut labels using the ornate layer dies, same die that I used to cut on the last card. And then I have my Love and Thanks to a Dear Friend stamp. Now, you could certainly stamp that whole sentiment if you want to use that whole sentiment. I just wanted to show you how it's possible to use only a portion of a sentiment. So if I just wanted something that said thanks instead of Love and Thanks to a Dear Friend, maybe I'm not thanking someone who is really close to me and I want to just say thanks. So to do that, you can use your Stampin' Write markers. Now, you cannot do this with Stampin' Blends. Okay, Stampin' Write markers are round. They are filled with the same ink that is in our ink pads. Stampin' Blends are alcohol-based. They are square markers, okay, and they cannot be used to ink a stamp. All you'll end up doing is staining your stamp. These are like a Sharpie, okay? They're a permanent marker. So we need to do this with our Stampin' Write water-based markers. And so all I'm going to do is open up so I have the brush tip showing. All of these markers are dual-ended, okay? So there's a fine writing tip and there is a brush tip. If you try to ink your stamp with the writing tip, it will not work, okay? You have to use the brush tip. And when I am inking, I'm not trying to actually trace the words. I am just taking the edge of my brush tip and I'm just running it over the word that I want for my stamp. And in this case, the word thanks. Okay, so I'm going over that a couple of times. You just want to make sure you get good coverage. It's not quite the same as when we ink up with our awesome foam ink pads. Okay, and then just blow on it a little bit to make sure that the ink is nice and moist. And again, it's always helpful to do a little practice, okay, to make sure that that's going to be straight. So now that I know exactly how I have to orient my stamp to get it the way I want it, I'm going to ink it again. And I'm going to stamp that on my label. Okay, oops, I got a little carried away there. That's okay, we can hide it with our flower. All right, so there is my stamp sentiment. And then I'm going to build my peony. So I have my large peony here and I'm going to add some flowers. So first thing I'm going to do is actually glue this on and I'm going to hide my little oopsie there with my stamp. So I'm going to put a little bit of tape right here. Did I say with my stamp? I mean my flower, not my stamp. So I'm going to actually cover up that little oops just like that. Okay, then I can take some glue dots. And I'm actually applying the glue dots to the front side of my leaf. And I'm going to just add them to my peony here. Whoops. We'll tuck this guy in under here, just like that, for my other two leaves. And we'll grab another one and put one out this way. And then one more. One down here. Okay, so that is going to get glued onto the front of my card and I'm going to actually pop it up. Now, before I glue that on, I'm going to tuck my other little peony in behind. Okay, so I'm just going to lay this here before I actually stick it down to get an idea of where I want this little guy. I'm going to add a little bit of tape and then I'm going to stick it into place before I glue my other one on. Okay, now I can take this, add my dimensionals, and we need to keep in mind that we only want dimensionals to go on this one, right? We don't want to put dimensionals all the way across here and end up sticking our card closed. So we need to be careful. So we're going to put our dimensionals sort of across the middle of the label, and I'm going to trim my edge here so that I use it up. And I'm going to add a little bit to one of my leaves here underneath. So we'll get rid of our backings. I need to get myself some more dimensionals. And then that is going to go on. And again, I want to make sure my words are straight, my label is straight, just like that. Okay, now again, if you want, I added some spatter on my sample. I actually used some of the Frost White shimmer paint just with an aqua painter and flicked it to get that shimmer. You can certainly do the same thing with a Wink of Stella. So I'll show you quickly how to do that. Okay, so we're going to take our Wink of Stella and we are going to just flick all over the front of our card. And that is going to give us a spatter of shimmer. Now once that dries, right now it looks really dark because of the alcohol. Once that dries, we'll just get a really nice shimmery shine. Okay, that's totally optional, totally not required if you don't want to do it. Just a way to add an extra little bit of sparkle. All right, now on the inside, you can add a stamp or a sentiment if you'd like. I decided because it was a fairly small area, I didn't want to add anything to decorate. I wanted the room to write. But if you would like extra space, you can, or if you don't want to have to write as much, you can certainly add a sentiment or another stamped image. And then to finish it off, we're going to take some more of our gorgeous elegant faceted dots and add them just around our peony. Anytime you are adding these to a project, you want to make sure you are making a triangle, okay? Your eye visually wants to see that triangle, Okay, that is it for card number 2. Alrighty, card number 3 is this beauty. Now, I love these dies from the Peony dies, the ones that make these 3D flowers. Now, I have to admit, when I first saw them, I was a little bit intimidated. I had no idea how they worked. I just knew that I was supposed to be able to get a 3D flower out of it and had no idea how. So I'm going to show you how the dies work and how to put them together to make these gorgeous 3D peonies. And you can you see the depth on that? It's amazing. And that's all achieved just with the use of dimensionals. Okay, to start, you are going to need 3 ink colors: So Saffron, Soft Seafoam, and Petal Pink. Now, if you don't have So Saffron, any shade of yellow will really do. It doesn't really matter. And then if you have your Stampin' Right markers, you will want your gray granite, because again, we're going to do a partial sentiment stamp here. Okay. All right. Now in your kit, the kit that we're using is this one. You have a whole bunch of die cuts. So we're going to just dump those out, and we have to do a little bit of sorting to start. So let's just get those all out of there. Move these other pieces out of the way for now. And you will see that you have 6 die cut leaves. There should be one more in there. There it is. And you have these little sort of squiggles. These are going to be our shadow or accent for the leaves. And if you're like me, you're kind of going, how does this work? I'm going to show you. Okay. Now I should point out that these actually are white on the back. That's because they have, adhesive sheets on the back to make it easier to stick them down. All right, so we're just going to set those aside, and we're going to work on our flowers to start. There'll be 3 of these little flower centers, and then you should have 3 sets of each one of these die cuts. Okay, so there's 2 flower centers. So we have a small, we have a medium, we have a large and an extra large. And then there's our 3rd center, small, medium, large, and extra large. Okay, so it's really helpful if you can sort these like this ahead of time, just to make it easier to kind of keep track of what you're doing. All right, so we are going to start with one of the smallest flower pieces. Okay, so I like to work from the inside out. I find it's the easiest way to assemble these flowers. So I want to add some color to my flower. So to do that, I'm going to take my sponge dauber and my Petal Pink ink, and I'm going to ink up my dauber, and I want to just sort of flick around the edges of my die cut. Now I don't need to go all the way down the sides because that part is not going to be seen. But what I do need to do is get this little bit in here. So to do that, I can actually just kind of go right across. This part in the back will not be visible or as visible. Okay, so that's my first layer. Then I'm going to take the next largest, same thing. I'm going to come down a little bit further with my ink and work my way around. And then again, I want to do that edge where that slot is. Okay, just like that. Okay, and then I'm going to take the next largest one, same thing all the way around. I'm not worrying about the bottom because it will be hidden. And then again, I want to come down along this edge. Sometimes it's easier to do this with it lying flat, but easier to get control of your dauber. Okay. And then the last one, the largest one, this one I do want to go all the way around. So I'm going to start by doing all of the edges. Okay, and then I also kind of want to go along this edge, and what I actually like to do with this is do it upside down and have it kind of come towards me like this. A little bit more ink. Okay, and now I've got that edge inked. All right, now I'm going to show you how to assemble one of these. I'm going to move these out of the way for just a sec. And we are going to start with our smallest piece. Okay, that is going to get inserted from the bottom into the next largest. And you're going to see when you insert it that the bottom edges line up. Just see how they're the exact same shape? So you're just going to insert it so that they line up like that. Okay, then the next one goes in, same thing. You're going to align your bottom edges. Okay, and finally, this one I actually find easiest to go in from the top. Okay, and again, you want to align those bottom edges. Now, you could totally assemble your flower like this, flat. Okay, a couple of glue dots tucked in there or some liquid glue, and you will have a nice flat flower. If this is a card that you want to be able to mail easily without paying extra postage, I would recommend leaving these flat. Okay, however, if you want to get that awesome 3D effect, I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to pull this apart again, and we're going to take our bone folder, and we're just going to burnish these a little bit to kind of give them a little bit of a curve. Do you see that? Okay, we're just going to burnish the edges to get some of that awesome dimension going. Okay, I'm going to do that with all of my pieces. Now, if you don't have a bone folder, you could use the edge of a ruler. That will work. The really important part is you don't want to pull too hard on this part because you can tear it, right? We don't want to damage our die cuts. So again, we'll just give these a nice little curl. And then the last one, same thing. This one I really like to get the edges of that bottom piece. Okay, so now I have some nice dimension going. Now I'm ready to go ahead and assemble. So I'm going to take my smallest one again, slide it in from the bottom. Okay, it's going to go just like that. Next one goes in. And again, I'm aligning those bottom edges. And then finally, this one I like to go in from the top, like that. Okay, just like that. Now, if you feel like that's not inked enough, you could certainly add a little bit more ink if you want more of a blush there. I think I'm okay, but if you wanted to add a bit more, you certainly could. Okay, now before we start sticking anything, we are going to ink our little flower centers. And for that, we need our So Saffron ink pad and a sponge dauber or makeup sponge or whatever. And we're just going to apply some color. That's it. And we don't have to do the whole thing because we're only going to see the top edge. And again, it does not have to be So Saffron. You could use whatever shade of yellow you happen to have. Really doesn't matter. Okay, that's all there is to that one. So now we're going to take one of our flower centers. It is going to go in that very first small piece. It's going to get slid right in there. Okay, so it's just kind of peeking out. And you can just set it in there. It's going to end up getting adhered once we add some dimensionals. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now and I'm going to show you my little trick for adding dimensionals to these. So what I like to do, I like to work with the mini dimensionals and my Take Your Pick tool. So I take the backing off first. I use my Take Your Pick to pick up that mini dimensional, and then I can tuck it in behind really easily. Okay, so that's layer one. So then I'm going to go behind layer two. Same thing. I'm going to get rid of my backing and add a mini dimensional. I'm going to actually add two to this one. I'm going to have mini dimensional backings all over my studio by the time I'm done here. So I'm going to add another one down in here. Okay, and then the last one, I'm going to again pull this back and add, and this one you can actually use the full-size dimensionals because you've got a bit more real estate to work with. So we'll peel the backing off there, and we'll tuck one in there. And this, you just want to make sure that those bottom edges haven't shifted, that it's still aligned. And we'll do one more, just like that. Okay, and now we've got that beautiful, can you see that from the top? That beautiful dimension. Now, if you'd like, you can certainly add some dimensionals in underneath here. If you want the extra lift, you just want to take care that you're not going to see it from the front. So when you're adding your dimensional, make sure that you're placing it in a spot that it's not going to be visible. Okay, I'm going to add a couple of minis under here as well. One there. I'm going to add another little guy on the front. Right there. Okay, so there is my first 3D peony. Isn't that pretty? So pretty. So then it's just a matter of repeating these steps to assemble your other 2 flowers. Okay, so there are my 3 3D peonies. Okay, so they are ready to go. Now we need to do a little bit of work on our leaves. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to pull in these sort of little squiggly bits that are hard to figure out what they're for. And I'm going to show you how we're going to add a little bit of shadow. So these are all kept from the same color of cardstock, but if you look on my sample, you can see that we have shadow on our leaves. So in order to do that, we're going to take some soft seafoam ink and our daubers, and we're going to apply some of that ink to those little die cuts. Now you want to be really gentle here because they are quite delicate. We don't want to tear them. But I find the easiest way to do it is just have it sitting on my work surface and just kind of brush the ink on with my dauber. Okay, so there we go. We have some darker shaded accents for our leaves. Now, we're going to sort these again by size. So we have 1, these 2 are the same, these 2 are the same, and these 2 are the same. Okay, so the way these work, if I take this, I'm going to actually layer it. So I've got the wrong leaf. Let's say I told you these are hard to figure out. This one is going to layer onto the medium leaf like this. Okay, it looks like it should go this way, but it doesn't. It goes on the base of the leaf like that. So to adhere these, we're just going to peel off the backing paper. There's a white backing paper on the back of each of these die cuts. There we go. And then that is going to get stuck onto our leaf. So I'm going to line up the base and just lay that along the edge of the leaf, just like that. Okay, and that's how we get the shading on our leaf. So there are our assembled leaves. Now we are ready, almost, well, no, we're ready to assemble the rest of our card. So we have in your kit a piece of soft seafoam cardstock. This is our card base. So we're going to fold in half along our score line and crisp that up. And then we have a piece of Peony Garden Designer Series paper, okay? And you also have a piece of gray granite shimmer ribbon. Now this is going to go on along the bottom edge of our DSP piece, about 1 to 3/4 inch up from the bottom. So I'm just going to lay that across, add a glue dot to one end, and wrap the end of the ribbon around and stick it to the back of my DSP. Same thing on the other end. And then that is going to get glued onto our card base. And you can use whatever adhesive makes you happy. There we go. Okay, now it's a matter of arranging our peonies. So first thing you want to do is figure out how you're going to place your peonies on your card so that they all fit, right? They are quite large, and we want to make sure that we get them all on so that they're not trailing off the edge of the card and causing us a problem when trying to get it into an envelope. Okay, so about, well, that's, yeah, about like that. Okay, now if you want an idea for spacing, we're going to stamp this in a minute, but just to get an idea, keeping in mind that this is going to tuck underneath like this. Okay, so you don't want to put your peonies too low because you still need room for your label. All right. Okay, so now it's a matter of adhering our peonies. We're going to add our leaves after the fact. Okay, so we're going to start with our peonies. We're just going to add a couple dimensionals. That's it. Okay, maybe 3. And we'll get rid of our backings. And we're going to place that onto our card. Okay, we're going to tuck the leaves in afterwards. So don't worry, I haven't forgotten about them. We just want to make sure we get our peonies placed in spots that they're going to work. So we are going to add this one here. And 1, 2, 3 to this one. Okay, and again, keeping in mind that this guy needs to go down here. Okay, now before we add our leaves, we're going to add our sentiment. Okay, so for our sentiment, we are using this sentiment stamp, which I just noticed I've mounted quite crookedly. I'm going to fix that. But we're not going to do the whole thing. We're actually just going to use friendship refreshes the soul instead of your sweet friendship. Okay. So again, we're going to use our Stamp-A-Rite marker to ink our stamp. This time I've got I've got gray granite. If you have only the basic gray, you can use the basic gray. But chances are if you have basic gray, you have gray granite because they're sold in color families. So I'm going to, just like I did on the last card, use my brush tip to very carefully ink my stamp. But only the portions that I want. Now, if you do not have all of the color families, or you're just starting out as a stamper and you want to be able to have all of the colors to play with, starting with the Stamp-A-Rite markers is a great way to get all of your colors because they're significantly cheaper. A color family of markers is significantly cheaper than a color family of ink pads, and you can ink your stamps with markers just like this. It takes a little longer, but it totally works, and it's a great way to kind of get going. All right, so I'm going to stamp my sentiment on my little label here, and again, I only want friendship refreshes the soul, right? So I'm going to stamp it right about there, just like that. Okay, all right, now let's close that up and bring back our card. Now this is going to tuck in here like this. Okay, so we're going to add a couple of dimensionals on the end that's going to kind of stick out, and then I'm going to add a little bit of tape on the other end. And then again, we're going to tuck this back in here. I'm kind of tucking it between the layers of the flowers here, and we're going to add that just like that. Okay, now I can go ahead and add my leaves as accents. So these can just tuck in wherever I feel like I want to add a little bit of greenery. So it's kind of the same as floral arranging, right? You always add your greenery after you get your sort of focal point, your flowers in. And it just helps you to get things arranged in a way that is going to be visually pleasing for you. So we'll add a couple up here. We're going to add a little guy down here, actually. I want to cover a little bit of my label there. So I'm just using liquid glue. I like the liquid glue again because it gives me that time to adjust things if I need to. I'm going to add another one down here, I think. Yes, I am. I like that there. Liquid glue is your friend when you need to kind of play around and adjust where things go. Let's put this guy here. Just like that. Come on, stick where I want you. I'm actually going to tuck a glue dot in under there because that one, because I've got dimensionals there, it's quite popped, and I don't want it to be popped quite that much. There we go. It's going to sit better. And we're going to add one kind of up here in the center of these flowers. So again, we'll grab our liquid glue and just tuck that in right about there. And then this last little guy is going to go sort of off to the side, just under here like this. But not sticking out too much because we want to make sure we can get it in the card. There we go. Isn't that pretty? Oh, so pretty. All right, last step on this one is to add our bow. Well, second last step, I should say. So this is tied for you from that same gray granite shimmer ribbon. I'm going to press the knot of my bow into a glue dot, and I'm actually going to tuck this right in underneath my flower there. Okay, and then if you would like, I did on my sample, you can add some of your elegant faceted gems. So I'm going to use some of the white sort of pearly ones this time. So we'll go 1 and 2 and 3, just to add a little shimmer and shine. And again, if you wanted to, you could certainly add some Wink of Stella to your flowers. Okay, now on the inside, you have another piece of Whisper White cardstock. You can do whatever you'd like on the inside. So I stamped the Love and Thanks to a Dear Friend image and one of the Peony images, which I then just sponged with a dauber to add some color. Okay, so that is card number 3. Alrighty, card number 4 is this fun fold. Okay, this actually uses very little cardstock, but is a great just variation on just a standard card fold. Okay, stands up like that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So what you need from your kit to start is this piece. It is 5.5 by 5.25. Okay, and then I've scored it at 4.25. Okay, and so the first thing we're going to do is actually create this decorative edge on here. So in your Peony dies, you have this sort of scalloped edge die. So you're going to run this through your die cutting machine so we're cutting this small 1-inch panel. You're going to run it through with the scallops flush with that edge. Okay, so you can go ahead and die cut that. Okay, so we end up with this lovely scalloped edge. Now you'll see that the die leaves a mark, but we're going to hide that with some ribbon, so not to worry. So now you can go ahead and fold along your score line and burnish that really well. Okay, and then we can go ahead and add our ribbon. So you have a long piece of ribbon, and this is going to go on so that it runs right across where that mark is from our die. We're going to wrap it around the back side and secure it with glue dots. Okay, so it's going to go on like that. So first thing we're going to do is add a glue dot to either end of our ribbon. And we're going to just lay that across and stick it down. Now we can always adjust this if necessary, but I'm pretty sure we're about where we need to be. Okay, just like that. Now the other thing we're going to want to do is add a glue dot right in the middle where our bow is going to go so that the ribbon doesn't kind of flop. So what I like to do is just pick one up either with the tip of my scissors or my take your pick and just press that into place so it stays put. Okay, we're not going to add our bow just now. We'll add it towards the end. All right, so that is our card base. Easy peasy, right? All right, then in your kit, you have a piece of Whisper White cardstock that is 4 by 4.25. And then you have a piece of embossed Granny Apple Green cardstock that is 4 by 4. Okay, so this is going to get layered. You're going to have your top and bottom edges flush, and then you're going to have a narrow border on either side. So it's going to go on like that. Okay, and again, I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue just to give me that wiggle time. If you don't have liquid glue, you can certainly use tape. It is just fine. So I'm going to get that lined up so that I have a nice equal border on both sides. Okay. All right, now this is going to get adhered to the center of our card. Now, I find it easiest to place this on my ruler on my grid paper. And then I can lay this down, so well, I'll put it up a bit higher so that you guys can see, because you probably can't see the edge of my grid paper on the camera. So I can lay this down. My bottom edge is going to be flush with the bottom edge of my card base. Okay, and I'm going to put this on. I'm looking at the green layer, and I have 1, 2, 3 squares, 1, 2, 3 squares on either side. That's how I know that I have it centered. Okay, don't worry about looking at the white layer, look at the green layer, and that will help you to get that centered. Okay, then what I'm going to do is take and apply some adhesive right along that top edge of my cardstock. Then I'm going to fold this shut and press it into place. And that gives me my card base. Okay, see how that works? Pretty slick, eh? All right, now we need to do some coloring. So in your kit, you have a piece of this beautiful gray floral DSP. It's 2 inches by 4 1/4, and we are going to do some coloring. Now, if you do not have blends or you don't want to color, you don't have to do this step. It looks just gorgeous, just as it is, okay? But I opted to color mine, so I'm going to show you how I did that. I colored my flowers with the Magenta Madness blends, and I colored my leaves with the Granny Apple Green. Now, because these flowers have so much shading, it really isn't necessary to shade. Okay, I have found with the dark colors that I didn't really need to shade. So I'm just going to use my light Magenta Madness, and I am just going to color my images. Now, you can use the light or the dark. It's entirely up to you. Just a tip, when you're coloring the DSP, you want to be very careful as you get near the edges. This does bleed a little bit. The DSP, it bleeds more than our regular Whisper White cardstock. So you don't want to get too right up to the edge. There will be some bleeding action that happens there. So just be aware of that as you're coloring. Okay, so there are my flowers. Okay, and again, I just used the one shade of the blends. And then I'm going to go in with my light Granny Apple Green and color the leaves. Now, again, you can use the light or the dark. It's up to you, whatever your preference is. And again, I'm not worrying about shading, just adding color. Okay, and again, it depends how many leaves you have. How much green you're going to have on your actual image. Okay, and then finally, to color the flower centers, I'm just going to use my So Saffron. This is my light So Saffron. You can use dark, you could use really any shade of yellow, whatever you have. Okay, and that's that. Super simple. All right, now I need to cut this in half lengthwise because I need my strips to be 1 inch each. I left them as a 2-inch strip because it's actually easier to color when you have a larger piece. So I'm just going to take and cut this in half lengthwise so that I end up with 2 1-inch strips. Okay. All right, now these are going to get glued on the left and right edges of our card base like that. Okay, so again, I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue just because it's easier to wiggle and get into position. And I have a really hard time with white on white, so I just have to pick it up and make sure that I'm getting it exactly where I want it. Okay, so there is one. And, oh, I'm not moved. Look at that. Don't you move. You stay right where I want you. And this guy's gonna go over here. Just like that. Okay, so that when we close it, we see a little bit on either side. All right, now we need to make ourselves another peony. So this time we are sponging using the Magenta Madness ink. Okay, so the colors that I used on this card are the Granny Apple Green, Magenta Madness, and Basic Gray. So we're going to pull out our Magenta Madness and our die cut flower. So not as many pieces in this one because we're only making 1 flower as opposed to 3. And we're going to go ahead and construct our flowers same way we did on the last card. Okay, so for my flower center, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the last card and use my So Saffron dauber to darken down the top of that flower center. Okay, there's our beautiful 3D peony. And now we're going to do the same trick with our leaves that we did on the last card, but this time instead of using the soft seafoam, we're going to sponge with the Granny Apple Green. So I'm going to grab my Granny Apple dauber and take and apply some ink. And these are going to look quite dark, but that's okay. We want that contrast with the solid leaf that's going to be underneath it. All right, there we go. And then it's just a matter of assembling our leaves just like we did on the last one. And I always like to kind of get a test here. So this guy goes on here. So we'll just take off our backing. And we're going to layer this on here. Just like that. So there's one. Okay, and you see what a difference it makes by adding that contrasting ink there, right? It's the same shade of ink, but it creates contrast. Okay, all right, last step before we finish assembling is to stamp our sentiment. So we have here a die cut label. This is cut using the Tasteful Labels dies. And this time we're going to use that same sentiment that we did last time, but this time we're going to use the entire sentiment. So I'm going to ink it up with my basic gray ink. And this time I want to stamp it sort of in the upper right corner so that I have room for my peony. And again, I'm going to practice one just to make sure. Yeah, this one's mounted a little bit crookedly. So I find I have to stamp it so it looks crooked to me, but then it's actually straight when I stamp it. Sometimes we don't quite get things mounted straight and we have to do a little bit of a compensating there. All right, so let's finish putting this one together. So we have our card base and we have one of these beautiful square vellum doilies. So the first thing we're going to do is glue that on. So just like we did before, we're just going to lay some tape down just to kind of tack it into place. It's going to get held securely once we add all of the other things on top of it. So that's just going to get glued centered onto the Granny Apple Green panel. And then the sentiment label is going to get glued on, but it's not going to be perfectly centered. Okay, if I perfectly center it, I will not have room for my peony. Okay, so we're going to actually kind of nudge it over a little bit. All right, so we're going to add some tape. You can use liquid glue for this as well. And we're going to glue this on so that it's a little bit to the right of center. Okay, just like that. And then just like on the last card, we're going to adhere our peony first by adding 3 dimensionals to the back of it. So 1, 2, 3, get rid of our backings. And then we're going to go ahead and stick that on. Now again, we want to make sure we're only sticking it to this panel, right? We don't want to stick it onto here because then the card won't open. So we're going to make sure we stick that down so that it is secured only to that green square. Okay. All right. Now we get to add our leaves just like last time. We can go ahead and add our shaded leaves here. So let's actually do this guy over here. Yes, I like that. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of glue here. Just like that. And then we'll add this guy over here. Now this one may stick off the edge a little bit, so I'm going to take care not to put glue on the end of the leaf because I want to make sure, again, that I'm not gluing my card shut. Okay. And then we're going to tuck this little guy in probably right on top. So we'll add just a bit of glue there and we'll tuck him in. Actually, maybe we'll tuck him in up here. There we go. I like that. Okay, and there is our finished card. Now, this is really quite popped. I'm actually going to add a couple of glue dots just to kind of flatten that down a little bit so that it's nice and secure. If you find your flower is a little bit too poofy, you can always add a couple of glue dots to just sort of secure it down. I tend to like to do it on the largest flower on either side And that mine just kind of holds everything in place. Not the largest flower, largest layer, I should say. There we go. Okay, and then finally we're going to add our bow by just pressing the knot into a glue dot. And again, we want to secure this centered on our card, right over top of the ribbon. And then a couple of elegant faceted gems. This time we'll use the ones that kind of look like diamonds. So we'll add a couple of these guys. Let's add one. Let's put this guy over here. Okay, and that is that. I didn't do anything on the inside again because there's not a ton of space to write, but if you wanted to, you could add a sentiment to the inside as well. Okay, that is card number 4, done and done. Okay, the last card we are going to make is this one. Now, this one looks like a standard card, but it's actually a little bit of a funky gatefold. Okay, a little bit different. I'll show you how I did the cuts. I've already cut your card base for you, but I'm going to show you how I did it so that if you want to recreate it, you know how to do it. So I started with a 8.5 by 5.5 piece of basic gray cardstock. Okay, I scored it 2 1/8 in from either side. So I don't like to measure, I don't like to open the arm on my trimmer. So anytime I can do it all on just the one surface. So if I bring my trimmer in here, you'll see what I mean. So I didn't want to extend this. So all I did is I put it in at 2 1/8 and scored, and then I flipped it and 2 1/8 and scored. Okay, so that I have equal panels on either side. And then to get these triangles on our base, what I did is I took my ruler. Actually, I used my grid paper, but I'll use my ruler just so that you can see it on the camera. And I measured to 2 3/4. So this is 5.5 inches, right? So I want to find the center, which happens to be 2 3/4 inches. So I'm going to just put a little pencil mark at 2 3/4, and I'm going to flip it around, do the same thing on the other side. So 2 3/4. Put our little tick. And then I'm going to bring in my trimmer. Now I'm going to use my little mini trimmer. You can use a regular trimmer. It doesn't matter, but there's not a lot of space here where I'm filming, and it's easier to use the mini. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to line up this little tick and this score line. Okay, so I'm going to insert my paper. I'm going to make sure my score line and my little tick are lined up with the cutting line. Okay, so if I'm using a regular trimmer, I'll just show you in a regular trimmer really quickly. So I'm going to line up the score line and the tick mark. Okay, and you can cut straight across. In fact, I'll do it now while I have it out. Okay, so right across like that. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to do the same thing here. So the tick and the score and cut. Okay, and that gives me one side of my triangles, and then I'm going to flip it around and I'll do the same thing. Oh, well, we have the trimmer here. I may as well just use the big one since it's here. All right, so again, we'll line up our score line and our tick mark and cut, and then same thing on this side. Make sure that's lined up and cut. Okay, and that gives me my triangles. I'm going to erase those little pencil marks. And we're good to go. Okay. Oopsie, my eraser's broken here. All right, so that is how I got my funky shaped card base. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and fold along those score lines and burnish them really well. And you'll see when I pull it in, I get this sort of cool gatefold look. Okay, so it opens like that. All right, now also in your kit, you have some embossed triangles. Okay, so these again, I embossed first and then cut. So again, I will show you what I did, but I'll just quickly show you how those are going to go on there. So they're going to be flush with the fold, and you're going to have an equal border on either on the two sides of the triangle. Okay, so I'm going to show you just with regular cardstock. I didn't emboss this ahead of time, but I'll show you how I cut these triangles. Okay, I started with a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of Whisper White cardstock. All right, and I'm going to put it into my trimmer so that I'm cutting on the diagonal from one corner to the other. So again, I'm lining up my corners in my cutting track. And here's a tip: when you're trying to cut on a diagonal, start with your blade in the middle and go out both directions, okay? And that will prevent your cardstock from tearing. Sometimes it tears or bends in the corner if your blade isn't super sharp. Okay, so now I have my two triangles this way. Now I need to find the center of this long line. So we could use Pythagorean theorem, but this is not math class and I don't want to give anybody hives. So we're going to go ahead and just measure this. So if you put this against a ruler, you will see that this is 6.5 inches. So half of 6.5 is 3 1/4. So we're going to put a little tick mark there, and we'll do the same thing on this one at 3 1/4. And we're going to do the same thing. Now I am going to bring my mini trimmer in for this. So this time I'm going to cut on the diagonal from my little tick to the opposite corner. Okay, so we're going to go from the corner, lining it up and stop. And that gives me my triangle that will fit onto my card front. Okay, so you do the same thing with both. I'm not going to take the time to do that, but that's all there is to it. Super easy, right? Just a little bit different way to add some interest to your designs. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and glue those embossed triangles onto the front of our card. So we'll add a little bit of adhesive. I'm going to use liquid glue again, just so that I can wiggle it into place. So we're going to put this guy on here. And we want to do it pretty much flush with the fold, not quite to the fold so that it doesn't interfere with the fold, but pretty much flush. Okay, and then the same thing on the other side. Just like that. Oopsie, that's not quite straight. There we go. Okay, so now we have our gatefolds. Okay, so now we are going to, and this kind of may seem odd, we are going to actually adhere our 4 by 5 1/4 inch Whisper white panel inside the card first. Okay, so that's this panel. So if you want to do any stamping on this, you're going to want to do that ahead of time. Now I'm not going to take the time to do it. You can stamp whatever you would like. I made this a sympathy card. So you can stamp your sentiment. I just stamped in basic gray. Okay, but then you're going to want to adhere the inside of your card. So once you've done your stamping, you're going to go ahead and adhere. Going to adhere that inside our card just like that. So the reason that we are putting this piece in first is because we have to use it as a guide to position our DSP panel. We want them to perfectly overlap, so that when we close the card, we don't see any of the Whisper white peeking out from behind the DSP. Okay, so we've got that layered where we want it. I'm going to go ahead and add some glue. You can use liquid glue or tape for this, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to apply glue to the right triangle and then close it. Okay, and then that gives us our gatefold. See how that works? Okay, all right, so now we're going to do a little bit of decorating. So we're going to add our little vellum doily here. Now this is going to go on in a diamond orientation. And again, we want to make sure that we're only adhering it to this side because this is going to open like this, right? So we're going to put a little bit of tape right there, just on that corner. And we're going to position our doily so that it's centered. I kind of look at the little circle in the center of the doily and get my points centered in there. And then I can kind of position it where I want it. Okay, so that will open. All right, now we're going to do some stamping and coloring. So in your kit, you have a smaller scrap of Whisper white cardstock. And we are going to use this Peony image from the Prize Peony stamp set. And we're going to stamp it in basic gray to start. So we'll ink that up and go ahead and stamp. And then we are going to shade this with the Magenta Madness blends. So this one I did shade. So we are going to use the same basic principle that we did when we were coloring with the petal pink. So we're going to start by laying down a layer of the light magenta to start. And again, I'm working in sort of quarter sections of the image here. And then I'm going to come in with my dark and just add the shadows where the shading is on the stamped image. And then come back in with my light and blend it out. Okay, and then I'm going to go on to the next section and continue until I filled in the entire flower. Okay, to fill in the center, I'm just going to use my light, so saffron or whatever yellow you happen to have, does not really matter, and just fill in the yellow in the center. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and die cut that out. All right, there's my beautiful peony. And then we need to stamp a sentiment. So again, I wanted to use a portion of the So Sorry for Your Loss stamp. Now I could totally use the whole thing if I wanted to. It's entirely up to you, but I'm going to just use my basic gray Stampin' Write marker once again and ink up only the So Sorry portion. Sometimes we need to say sorry, even when it's not a loss. So sometimes it's good to have an I'm sorry card, because sometimes we screw up and we need to apologize. So it's always handy to have a couple cards that are appropriate for that. So again, I'm going to just try stamping this on my grid paper just to make sure I have the orientation correct. So again, we'll just ink this up. Get the little bend in the Y there. And I've got this die cut label. This is die cut using the Tasteful Labels dies once again. Okay, and stamp my So Sorry. And then that is going to kind of get tucked behind my peony. So I'm going to add just a little bit of tape. You'll notice I stamped towards the right on my label. So I'm going to add my peony here. All right, and then this is going to go on the front of my card. Now, once again, I'm only going to glue on this side so that my card will open. So I'm going to add some dimensionals behind my peony. Kind of like that. Okay, now if you're nervous, you can put your dimensionals right here. Okay, but if you want to double check, just make sure when you open your card, you're not seeing any dimensional there. Okay, and that's how you can be sure that you are not gluing your card shut. Okay, so we're going to close this up and add that beautiful flower. And there we go. There is our finished card. So simple. Now, I didn't add any of the gems to this card on my sample, but you certainly could if you were so inclined. You could also add a little bit of Wink of Stella, whatever makes you happy. I just kind of felt like maybe on a sympathy card or an I'm sorry card, I didn't want any bling, but it is entirely up to you. Okay, so that is our final card, everyone. Can you believe it? Okay, everyone, there are our 5 finished projects. I hope you've enjoyed this class. I really love this bundle, this whole suite of products. It's just gorgeous. And there are so many possibilities. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you check out my YouTube channel. I have done a couple of videos using this particular bundle. So you may want to check those out for more inspiration using the Peony Garden Suite. All right, thanks so much for purchasing this online class. Stay tuned for more. I've got lots of ideas, and I hope you will enjoy future classes with me. Thanks again. Have a great day.